pay probably $1,500, $2,000 a month. In Englewood, what's the same rent? So why is the parking meter rate the same at both locations, even though the rents would be different? So they need a much more dynamic pricing model where they could actually adjust the pricing. Maybe it should be a quarter an hour.
Based on cost of living or
well just demand.
Income.
It should be demand-based pricing. So that would not only be helpful to the retailers, but I ultimately think that the company that controls the meters now would actually get more income, because there are people that are completely ignoring the meters in some areas where they can just drive around the corner and park on a residential street.
Well, the problem with the residential streets, though, is they have the the parking permit.
Yeah, the residential permit parking, which is a completely separate problem, which I have issues with as well.
But sometimes people park there because it's a risk. Sometimes you don't get a ticket because
it's not often enforced.
It's not often enforced, except again in Lincoln Park or Lakeview, or but there's also meters on some residential streets. I was in Chinatown, and Chinatown on residential streets has parking meters. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So where do people who live there park?
I don't know.
Because not every place has a garage.
In these areas, Lakeview has some of these areas too, where half a block into a residential zone, there's metered parking. It's RPP, residential permit parking, and metered parking, which is very confusing.
Now, aren't we also pricing out low-income people, working-class people, people who are productive, they have jobs, but it's a very expensive city to live in.
It is.
And Chicago is always a blue-collar, working-class city. You had the steel mills, you had the stockyards, you had, this was part of Chicago lore and history, but we're pushing the people who made Chicago, in my opinion.
I don't know if I have an opinion on that, to be honest. I just think that rents are based on, demand. So I don't know why parking rates should not also be based on demand. And the thing is, like I said, I think if you went to a demand-based model, parking would be lower by its very nature, because the parking in the neighborhoods that there isn't a big demand, you'd be able to afford to park.
I've gone to the parking meter court, which is run by a private law firm, and there are a minority, not exclusively, Hispanic and black, who are filing bankruptcy because of parking tickets.
That's not a surprise.
Is that an effective economic model that helps people? I hear this rhetoric that we're helping people, that we're pro-working class or pro-families, but to me this is an economically onerous system.
Well, I think it's the parking is part of a larger issue where, in my mind, that we are not a pro-business community. So, the retail sales tax is very high.
Well, the sales tax is the highest in the country.
It is.
Combined with the Illinois, the county, and the city combined.
Correct.
When you're and if you're between, I think it's Ashland to the lake, like 31st to whatever it is, there's the McPier tax.
Right.
So you have the McPier Authority tax, and I think it's another whatever it is. So you have the highest sales tax in Chicago. Now, it's not just Chicago sales tax, it's Illinois County.
Right.
If you're in that area, McPier, or whatever other authorities there are. But it's still the highest sales tax in the country.
Correct. But it's those little things
but you're right.
It's difficult for business to operate in the city, and it also discourages customers from coming in and spending their money when you can go out to Schaumburg at Woodfield, park for free, and not pay Oak Brook and not pay the taxes that you're paying in Chicago.
Right.
So it's those little things that mean a lot.
Well, I think it hurts the consumer and the business, and I think you're right. It's an anti-business model, because when I meet people, let's say in the 41st Ward, people want to go to Park Ridge because there's parking, even though there's some very good restaurants in Edison Park, Norwood Park area. So I think if I go to the 10th Ward, which you don't have any dining options, they want to go to Indiana, which is right across the border, and eat Indiana, or meat, and sometimes when you meet, you eat. So when I meet people, and I meet a lot of people in my line of work, I'm going across lines.
Right, and spending your money outside of Chicago.
Right, so if you're living in the 41st or the 45th Ward, 39th Ward, 38th Ward, 36th Ward, you're going to Harwood Heights or Norridge or Niles or Lincolnwood or whatever else.
Right, it's very easy to go and spend your money in those communities as opposed to spending it in Chicago, where the tax revenue, not only would you benefit the businesses there, but the tax revenue would benefit the city.
Well, as a side note, I went to Santa's Village with my goddaughter, and I took my compadre, her father, and we went into a store there, and he was just shocked. He was like a kid in the candy shop in East Dundee, King County, because he wanted to buy it. He goes, I want to keep on going back to Santa's Village because I want to shop here because the prices were so much lower, because the taxes in King County are so much lower. So I think we're really seeing an exodus of money here.
Right, and I hear from a lot of drivers who say, you know, to heck with the city. With these new speed cameras. I don't want to come and risk getting a $35 or $100 ticket. I'm gonna find a place to go in the suburbs where I can have a good meal. I'm not going to come to the city anymore, and then also pay the high meter rates.
Right.
So there's the policies of this administration and the prior administration, in a lot of ways, discourage people from wanting to come to the great city of Chicago.
Right, and then in terms of business, you still have the head tax. It's much smaller than it was in the years past, but you still have a head tax, a per employee head tax for business. That's a slap in the face to business. And while I think that the rights of workers should be balanced with business, businesses employ people.
Right.
And you can't just have municipal workers or a couple businesses for the super wealthy.
Right.
Tech center or whatever. I mean, there's much beyond that. I mean, I'm almost demoralized. I mean, I have relatives who are selling buildings in the city so they get out. I have friends who are moving out of the city, relatives who don't want to live in the city.
Businesses
and
that are
and
moving
I grew up
out.
and I loved Chicago, And yes, the mayor talks, we brought this in, or Boeing came in, or they're talking to ADM or whoever they're talking to.
But they have to bribe them to come here.
Well,
have
they're
to
giving them
through
great
tax-
incentives. But
Right.
even Boeing, how many net jobs did Boeing really produce here? Was it worth it?
That's a great question.
Right, and I don't think it was. And it's a great name on the moniker that we took from Seattle, Boeing, or whatever else. But the fact of the matter is that small and medium-sized businesses are leaving every day. We may have a couple of major news events where we're bringing something in, but more businesses are leaving Chicago, Illinois.
Well, small business is the biggest employer in
Right,
general.
small business is the biggest employer.
So in my mind, they should be catering to the small businesses and trying to make it as easy as possible and I don't know what the right word is, but less punitive, so people can start businesses easily and try to flourish and grow businesses, employ people, and increase the tax base.
Right. And the more businesses that leave is less jobs for people, and that's why Chicago has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country at this
Right.
time.
Illinois as well has one of the highest.
I mean, I think it was at 13% at one point, which was at least a couple or a few points higher than the national average.
Yes.
So and I see businesses leave all the time, or closing, or contracting. Mm-hmm. Maybe they wanted to stay smaller, they'll make their profit, but they're not expanding.
Right.
So you see them leave, you see them close, or you see them contract. So to our viewing audience, I don't want this to sound like a depressing show, although I don't know what the answer is, and some of it is depressing. You have high property taxes, you have the highest sales tax in the country, the highest parking rates in North America, and now we have the distinction of being the highest amount of red light cameras, and we're going to be the highest amount of speed cameras. I don't know what to say. That's why retirees are moving to Arizona and Florida, not just because of the weather, but the cost of living.
Right.
They can get a lot bang for their buck, so they're taking their pension money from Chicago outside and living somewhere where you don't have the same taxes and you have a lower cost of living.
Right. Some are moving into Mexico and to Honduras and
Right, Honduras.
Costa Rica.
Right.
And their money goes a heck of a lot farther there than it does here in the United States.
And I'm not saying we have to go to a Mexico or Honduras economy, but I think that we could radically decrease costs here in a market fashion, maybe with some adjustments. But I mean, I just it is depressing because I don't think Chicago, and I don't think it can be sustained because I don't think there's enough rich white people to make Chicago only a playground for the rich.
Right.
Because you just can't do that. Somebody still needs to clean bathrooms and serve food.
You
and
need
things
everybody.
Like that.
You need a spectrum of income levels and a diversity of people to make a city a livable place and a great place to raise a family.
But right now, I think to really enjoy Chicago, you have to be very wealthy.
Well, that's true in general.
Well, but I think Chicago used to be a place where you could be a middle class, working class person and have a decent bungalow-sized home and have
able to
enough
go out
money
to
to
eat
send
once
their
in a
kids to
while.
Catholic schools. Yeah, go to eat out once in a while.
I would
take
agree.
a yearly vacation. And we've gone to a point where our taxes and regulations and fees and fines, because essentially red light cameras and speeding cameras and parking tickets and even the parking meter is taxes.
Correct.
It's a tax.
Right.
And so it becomes so onerous. How do people afford it?
Right.
I mean, I'm a lawyer. I mean, I have a hard time affording it because it becomes so onerous. You have property taxes, sales tax, this tax, fees, fines, etc. and then if you do drive a lot, and I have to drive a lot, unfortunately, I don't like driving a lot, but I do. If you get these tickets, it's just another fee and fine that becomes, some people can't afford it.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's. I think what happens with parking tickets and these other kind of tickets, it's much more impactful on people of lesser means because they have less of an ability to pay it, and then if the fines double, then all of a sudden they're even in more trouble. So, if you have the money in the bank and you have a $50 ticket, well, it's not that big of a deal for you to pay it before it doubles. Whereas somebody who's having problems making ends meet and paying their rent, buying groceries, you're just going to blow that ticket off, but it's still going to double, and you're still going to be on the hook for it at some point. So it's very difficult. I think there is it's oppressive to people of lesser means.
But here's one thing I don't understand, and maybe you can help me because you've been on this issue. However many hundreds of thousands of people came out for the Stanley Cup, and I like the Hawks. I think it's great. I like that Chicago sports teams wins. I think it's good for the economy.
It's wonderful.
However, how come there wasn't all these hundreds of thousands of people when you had this parking meter deal, which has much more impact on people's lives? Because I'm glad that the Hawks won, but I don't worship the Stanley Cup. It's a cup. I don't care.
Right.
I mean, I just think there's misplaced priorities here in our society, and sports and other things have become like the gladiator games. That's the Colosseum of ancient Rome to get the people's attention off whatever the Roman Senate was doing.
Well, I have a little bit of an explanation for it. Part of the reason the meter lease deal didn't get a lot of attention was because the city council members were given essentially 2.5 days to read the document and vote for it. Okay, so
but they could have done parliamentary movers like
they could have, but the problem
defer
is
it.
Right, but the problem was that you had because of the machine controlled aldermen, right? It was just very difficult to do anything, and they were basically had a gun to their head, say you got to make a decision right now. Nobody read it, and they said take a vote, and they did, and so they didn't have a chance to have real hearings on it and talk to Chamber of Commerce's and business leaders and citizens. They just jammed it through, and that makes it even more distasteful in my mind that they would have. That they would do this. I mean, it's perhaps the worst deal of all time for the city of Chicago, and I think objectively it is.
Objectively, in terms of dollars,
and how it was jammed down the throats of the taxpayer in the city.
So, is there any redress that we have? Is there anything, or we're just stuck with it?
It's hard.
I won't say the word on television, but we're beep 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 beep.
I think we are.
Okay, so we are. Beep, 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 beeped.
I can't disagree.
Well, that's sad. That's very sad. But on the positive note, you heard some practical tips today on how to get out of parking tickets and speeding tickets for the cameras. And there are a number of things, these devices and apps where you could learn where they are and they notify you, or certain plastic, some that are illegal, some that might be against the law, that you can put on the cover that could stop you from getting the camera ticket. And the parking tickets, if they make errors on the parking tickets on the type of car, the registration date, or on the location, or what the sign says, you might be able to get out of that parking ticket.
Correct.
Okay. And you should definitely look at theexpiredmeter.com because you have other information there. I've looked at your website.
Lots of information, news, views. We have lots of advice. I have a bi-weekly column on how to fight parking tickets where people send in their questions. You can email me questions or post comments. I also contribute to DNA Info Chicago. I write about the transportation issues, and my column is also posted at dnainfo.com.
dnainfo.com, it's a good news source, kind of innovative.
Very innovative.
And I think it's going to be the future in terms of news sources.
I hope so.
Bigger papers are unfortunately smaller. It makes me sad because I used to get the big Sunday paper, and now the Sun-Times Tribune are kind of small. But the money, the internet, it's changed, and I think it's the new news source. Any last comments for our viewing audience?
Slow down near those speed cameras, please. We don't want you getting tickets.
But if you do speed up, listen to him, watch his blog, and try to get out of them. Thank you to our viewing audience. Good night, and God bless.